Welcome everyone. We're still expecting a few more CEOs to join us today. My name is Albert Drapeau, and I'm with the Yukon First Nation Chamber of Commerce in the role of Executive Director, and to my left is Melissa Murray, who is our Project and Membership Coordinator. I'm pleased to have Scott Milton from Yukon Government, Highways and Public Works, join us today to present the 5-year capital plan, community development agreements, and community contract information. I would also like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Kwalman Dun and the Ta'an Quechin people in government. We are fortunate that we're here and it's summer, and I know it's hard to be inside when it's so beautiful outside. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us here today. I also want to acknowledge that we're doing this in partnership with Peter Turner and Amos Westrup from the Council of Yukon First Nations, and also for Ben for putting it in our ear in late May that this would be very helpful for the Yukon First Nation Development Corps to hear what the 5-year capital spend is going to be, so that it can help prepare them to participate on government contracts. So with that said, welcome Scott. I'll turn it over to you and take it away.
Okay, thanks Albert. And yeah, many years ago, Albert and I did work together in the Department of Economic Development. So yeah, I also want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territories of the Ta'an Quechin Council and the Kwalman Dun First Nation. And yeah, I really thank everybody for taking a bit of time to meet with me today. Appreciate that opportunity. And I apologize, I was supposed to be joined by Madeline Wilson from the Procurement Support Center today, but she's tied up in another meeting and isn't able to join us. So it's just me today. And I will speak to community development agreements and the community contract forecast. I probably can't speak to that quite as well as Maddie, but yeah, we'll do that. And if you have any questions, I can certainly bring them back to her and we can try and answer those. So so today, yeah, we're pleased to kind of provide an overview of the 5-year capital plan, and also to really give you an update on our engagements with Yukon First Nations. We're at an interesting point right now. As you know, much time, much effort has gone into crafting the Yukon First Nation procurement policy over the last 2 years with a technical working group and with leadership. And now we have the industry working group that's meeting and engaging in that process. The First Nation procurement policy is quite exciting, I think, and is real. What we're finding as we're talking to First Nations is a really clear link between what we do in terms of 5-year capital planning in my office and that policy, and it's a really useful connection, I think, as we're having those conversations. So yeah, it's evolving well, those two things fitting together. Just in regards to the capital plan today, I really want to talk about 3 things, and I don't have a PowerPoint. If anybody was hoping for a PowerPoint, I don't have one. I try not to use them actually, but so I'll just be talking, and we can pause if you have any questions at any point. Just raise your hand virtually or otherwise. I'll create pauses, and if you have questions, we can stop. But I want to talk about 3 things today. One is just to talk about our annual engagements with First Nation governments, what those are and how they've evolved and kind of where they are today. Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting process. We'll spend some time, of course, talking about the 5-year capital plan, Yukon government's 5-year capital plan itself. And again, we'll talk a little bit about how that's evolved.
Sorry, Scott, you froze up. Hello? Did everyone freeze?
Yeah.
Is good, but is still valuable, I think, to do those. So, so I think we started out these presentations with kind of our presentation of our 5-year plan. We'd present that, we would take questions and kind of wrap. But I think it's evolved quite nicely in that we're always really interested in learning about the plans and priorities of First Nations themselves, and probably as much or more as spending time discussing our own capital plans. So we always appreciate to kind of hear about the planning at a First Nation level and see how well those things are meshing with our planning. And we've evolved those meetings, like I say, and this year we opened up some conversations just around the implementation of the First Nation procurement policy, and specifically around community development agreements. And it's our really strong sense that First Nations are really ready for those discussions, and in the context of those meetings and the presentations around the 5-year plan. So when we meet with First Nations, and I didn't present like an overall list for this group, but we share a 5-year list of projects with them that are specific to their traditional territories, and we actually try and include more detail in that than you might find in the public version of the plan. And we try and provide as much even of the small projects, even like painting a building, or you're replacing a culvert, or those type of things, small brushing contracts where we can. Those are of real interest to First Nations when we have those conversations. So so in those discussions, we do provide as much detail as we can, more detail than what you might find in the public plan. And then when we meet, we do our very best to answer questions from them, and where we can't, we're able to work kind of within and across the Yukon government to get answers or contacts for them who can best speak to whatever that issue is. And we try and get that information back. Our standard on that is we try and get back to First Nations no later than a week after we meet. So we've been generally holding to that. So that's been working out well. And yeah, I think First Nations generally appreciate the information that they get, and the opportunity to kind of see our plans. So generally, we're trying to have those meetings in March, April, or May. But again, last year, COVID impacted us, and those kind of happened through the summer and actually into the fall last year. This year, of course, we got hit by the territorial election and put a pause on things. But really, we hope to get back into that schedule, that timeline next spring. So the budget typically gets released in the first week of March, and then we want to be out very shortly after that, starting our engagements with First Nations, ideally. I mentioned that last year, or this year, thus far, we've met with 8 First Nations. We'll be up to 9 next week. And I think just overall, just on that, we have a really strong interest in evolving that process every year. And now we've got this link to the First Nation procurement policy. It's yeah, it's a really good step forward this year. That was a pretty key development for us. I'll pause there. That's sort of the process we undertake with First Nations around our engagements. And before I get into anything on the 5-year plan, does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. And again, stop me at any time if you do have a question on anything. So I'll talk a little bit about the 5-year capital plan. I think hopefully you have a copy of that, or it was sent to you. It's certainly available on the Yukon government website in our budget documents if you don't have a copy of that. So that's the public version of the 5-year plan. So just so you know that my office, the capital planning office here in Highways and Public Works, we work across all government departments and most of the corporations as well, directly with management board itself to develop and update the 5-year capital plan. This year is the 4th update to the 5-year plan. So the 4th year we've published a 5-year capital plan. And I think we found early on in that process that when we did our 5-year capital plan, 1 year to the next, certainly the first year to the second year, there was quite a few changes. And second year to the third year, perhaps still some changes. But we are finding actually that our plan is stabilizing, and that projects that we do plan in year 4 or 5 just move into years 3 and 2 and whatnot, eventually get implemented. So we've hit that point now in terms of 5-year planning where their plan is starting to stabilize. It's starting to become more predictable. And we are seeing that nice progression from projects sort of out in distant planning to implementation. That's happening. So that's where you want to be in terms of 5-year planning. So we're getting there. So just in terms of the plan, this year's planned gross spending target is $434 million, and that's up from $370 million that we had planned last year. And that growth trend in capital spending, that's due mainly really to increased or new spending opportunities that are supported by federal funding programs. So, and that includes an increase in infrastructure development spending through the Investing in Canada infrastructure program, mainly the stuff that's administered through community services and gets out to communities for a lot of different projects. That's increased. As well, we've got transportation spending related to the North Klondike Highway through the National Trade Corridors Fund, a significant capital program there. The Yukon Resource Gateway is planned for an implementation year this year. We're hoping to get going on the Carmax bypass shortly. As well, this year, we get another big federally funded program. The construction has started now on the Dempster Fiber project along the from Dawson up into Inuvik. That project's under construction now. And then another big project for us is the Sutherland Bay Bridge that we're planning to be tendering sometime later in 2021. I don't have an exact date for that one yet. Of course, that's down by Teslin. And again, I won't go into that plan into a lot of detail, but just to highlight a few of the other things that are in the plan and projects that are included in the 5-year capital plan, more the ones that are more happening this year or soon. Of course, the Whistlebend Elementary School is, the tender on that is closed, and we're just getting close to an award on that project. The Old Crow Health and Wellness Center in Templex, as well, is now under construction. That project is happening. There's a lot of energy projects in the plan. Last year we had the McQuestion transmission line that was funded through YDC to YEC, the Yukon Energy Corp. This year their focus is going to be on the Whitehorse Battery project in Whitehorse, storage facility for electricity. We have a lot of funding in the plan for energy retrofits, both for Yukon government buildings and for First Nation housing, and also for the public to access through some of the programs through Energy Mines and Resources. And we have also our own green infrastructure program, which is all about putting renewable energy in government buildings. So that, and renewables right now, mainly the focus is on biomass, although we are thinking about that slightly broader as well. We're at an interesting phase in terms of the Whitehorse Airport, and there's lots of planning work going on there for reconstruction of the Whitehorse Airport runway. That'll be a fairly major capital project in and of itself. Both runways will be rebuilt over the next 3 to 4 years. And of course, we are focused on lot development and housing, a lot of housing projects in Whitehorse and in communities, and then lot development in Whistlebend as well. Yeah, so I'm really not my intention to go through that plan in detail, but I've kind of highlighted the highlights or some of the highlights there. Certainly, as you look at that document or you go through that, and if you have any questions or want an update on anything that's in there, you can be in touch with me in my office, and we're very glad to provide you any information that you're looking for. So last year, about this time, we were really we were monitoring the capital plan really closely for impacts related to COVID-19 and any possible delays or higher costs for any capital projects that we might have been experiencing at that time. That was a huge risk, actually. So we engaged with industry and talked to First Nations as well, and kind of managed through that. I think in the end, I mean, COVID had impacts, but it didn't grind things to a halt. And certainly a lot of our capital program unfolded as we planned it. But this year, we're also have kind of another risk in our plan, and we're looking really carefully and closely at construction costs, and particularly for materials and their impacts on project budgets for construction projects. I mean, we are really starting to see the impact of that, and early indications would tell us that that is having like I say, a significant impact on some projects, not all. I think we're seeing it certainly on anything that's related to housing, wood-based residential housing has certainly had an impact. Some of our building projects as well that are institutional or commercial, not as reliant on wood, but still having an impact. We're not seeing a huge impact on road construction this year yet in terms of cost, but we might in terms of once we get into some maybe of the bigger culverts or maybe even the Sutherland Bay Bridge tender later. So we're keeping a pretty close tab on that. So we've been working a lot with a group of economists, both internally and externally to YG. And we're just about done this now. We've completed a bit of an analysis on what we might see for impacts to construction. And as we've been meeting First Nations, we've been mentioning that we're very happy to share that. That information will be available either through our website or we'll send it out directly to anybody who wants it. So anybody who might be involved in construction or have an interest in construction costs, we're happy to share what we come up with there. So anyway, generally for COVID-19, I think what we're seeing is less of an impact than what we experienced last year. Mobility to and through the territory has increased, and I think as we see those, the SEMA state of emergency kind of get lifted over time, you might get back to a bit of a more normal sort of environment for construction. But there's certainly that kind of lingering hangover in terms of material costs and inputs as well. So I'm going to pause there just for a second because I see some questions. I'm just going to see if I can answer those. So a question on which RCMP detachments. That's a good question. I don't have that with me right now. You may be aware that we are funding, we provide funding to the RCMP in sort of a sinking fund every year to replace or upgrade detachments. I haven't seen the most recent plan on that, so I don't want to speak with that with certainty, but I know in the past they've looked at Faro and they've looked at Car or Cross, but I'm not sure where they are right now, so I don't want to say with certainty. And then their question around boat launches and docks and community pools would be updated. So yeah, there is some information in the plan around some of the planning around community pools, boat launches and docks. I'm not sure if we have that level of detail in there. If there's a specific question there, I can try and follow up and get an answer. And then there's a question there about a breakdown of activities within traditional territories. And yeah, I'm happy to provide that. We have that information actually available. Yeah, we have it sort of individually for every traditional territory, and we share it when we talk to First Nations. But if there's a desire to see kind of an overall breakdown, happy to provide that. And I could circulate it back through maybe Albert and Peter if there's an interest for folks to see that. We could commit to doing that as well. So again, just on while we're on pause here, does anybody else have any other questions before I carry on?
Scott, with the projects in the traditional territories, how would First Nation go through the process of getting a CDA?
Yeah, good question. So what we're doing now is identifying like we're sort of giving a list of projects that we're planning over 5 years. And as I understand it, through the First Nation procurement policy, there is certain allotments over 5 years for First Nations to choose CDAs. So if they have an interest in a particular project and want to sort of start a conversation or a discussion around a possible CDA for that project, they can loop back through the Procurement Support Center, through Maddie Wilson right now is the director there. And then she can facilitate a link with the delivery department or the project team. And then, if there's an interest, I think those conversations can start from there. But we've been, again, as we talk to First Nations, that question comes often up in those conversations. And yeah, so the procurement support centers are very useful starting point for that, and then we can get going from there. So.
And would the CDA be signed by the First Nation government or the First Nation Development Corps?
Yeah, good question, Albert. I admit that I don't know the answer to that, but I can take a note on that one and follow up with you on that. So if Maddie was here, she could answer that. So yeah.
You must jump in there, Albert, and say that the policy envisions sort of an intergovernmental.
Sorry, Amos, it's really hard to hear you. You're breaking up. Can you speak closer to your mic or something?
Yes, I'll try, but it might be my internet. Is that any better?
Tiny bit better.
Okay, well, I might have.
You're breaking up.
Maybe put it in the chat. Are we frozen?
No, we're good.
Just
So Amos dropped off. He might be coming back in. He might have an answer for that question. He might type it into the chat for me. Amos, as you know, has been fairly tied into the First Nation procurement policy process. So, and if he doesn't have an answer for that, I'll certainly follow up. So yeah.
Okay. Amos is connected.
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Amos.
I'm back. Is that any better?
Oh,
That's better. Yep, that's better.
Okay. I was just going to say that development of the CDAs are an intergovernmental process. So the expectation is that the agreement would be concluded with the First Nation government and the government of Yukon. Having said that, I think it's important that First Nation governments invite their development corporations to the table at the very start of the process. And in my view, the start of the process is the review of the capital spending plan along with the community procurement forecast. Because that's the first sort of opportunity that the First Nation government has to start identifying projects that would be of interest. And I think that's a discussion that really ought to include the development corporation. And that, I think it's also important because it also is an opportunity for Scott's shop and the Procurement Support Center to facilitate introductions to the project lead or that department that has responsibility for a particular project. So if we're talking about the construction of a school, likely involve the CDA discussions would likely involve education as well as folks from highways and public works. So for those reasons, I think it's really important if development corporations were not invited to this round of capital spending plan meetings, that they try and get an invitation to those. Thanks.
Thank you, Amos.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Amos. That's useful. And to Amos's point, if there is a First Nation DevCorp or a group of DevCorps that would like to meet to review plans, we definitely would be open to that. And again, you can be in touch with me or Maddie on that if there's an interest on that. So, any other questions? And I'll before I carry on.
Hi, as you were explaining that, Amos, I had just a challenge. I think the relationship between the First Nation government and the DevCorps are not always as smooth as you would expect or hope for. So it does, that's challenging politics to expect that DevCorps are going to be invited to these government-to-government meetings or that the information will be conveyed in a timely manner. So I think there needs to be an additional workaround for that, where the capital plan and the opportunities within traditional territories or Yukon wide is shared at a DevCorp level, so that there can be that opportunity for partnerships and just the uptake on really what are the opportunities for First Nations and First Nation businesses to participate in the economy in Yukon. So there needs to be that additional opportunity.
Rich. Yeah, thank you, Mathia. Totally hear you there. And perhaps if CYFN and the chamber can help facilitate that bridge, that would be great, so that we could share the capital spending plan and information that HPW wants to share. We can definitely do that. Would that work?
I think that's necessary. Like yeah, I'm on a couple of DevCorps, and we need that opportunity. We need that opportunity to have the larger discussion and the opportunity to build those relationships across businesses and to leverage whatever businesses are there right now. Think of CYFN and Castle Rock, leveraging that existing business with money from another DevCorp. So there's a lot of opportunities here, and I think we need that larger forum to have those discussions.
Yeah, totally agree. It helps build alliances and participation and for sure.
Look at that.
Albert?
He's turned on his camera and he's saying, yes.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say, Matea, good point. I sent that out to the group. I think too, we need to realize, and Amos and I have met, and we'll have a couple other meetings. The way we're structured is different than a lot of the other DevCorps, because a lot of the other DevCorps are, not only are they true development corps, but they're hybrids. They also do social and community, which I don't play in that world. My mandate is to generate wealth for generations to come, and I'm purely a private equity type. So, you know, I'm in it to make money for the First Nations. So it is, I think it is important, because I don't get involved in politics. That's not, it doesn't help me with growing the business and going forward. That actually resides up with Chief and Council, and when it comes to community out in Champagne-Agiac, out in Hinge Junction, etc., that's really focused between government and the community corp, and we subsidize or come into there and assist through the Castle Rocks, the Northern Windows and Doors, etc. But that's not the area I play in, and I've been given clear boundaries of I'm not to be playing politics. So I agree with what Matea said. I think we need to. For sure. It's another session, but it's a different group than what the government to government stuff's doing.
So Alex, how could YFNCC and CYFN help bridge that information to Castle Rock and to Northern, or?
Yeah, we do that already. So you know, when we need the information, we do get the information. We sit on, you know, the construction group, etc. So I mean, the Yukon Construction Association. So I mean, we are connected in, we are hearing what's going on, but it's you know, some of these things that we're getting into, it's politics, and I'm not in it for politics. I'm in it to make, you know, to run a business and run a successful business for Champagne-Agiac. So I think by potentially, maybe this is a different meeting with, you know, again, meeting with government to have these discussions, but it's going to be at a different level. Like, you know, my approach is I'm in it for business. So if we want to sit down and have a business to business conversation, which means everything's kind of on the table and it's around running business. But when you start throwing politics into it, it makes it difficult for me to react to that, because that's not my mandate. That's where I defer to Chief and Council and to if it's inside a Champagne-Agiac or, inside traditional territory, it's going to be chief and council and the community corp. So again, we're a bit unique. I know there's a couple others that are similar to it, or there's a hybrid of there. But when it comes, again, the biggest thing I can stress is, and I know Castle Rock has been used as, it's the biggest thing that's been targeted through this whole thing when it came out. There's, and I'm going to say probably more so on the negative side than the positive side. But again, I have no problems with sitting down and talking about, if we're going to talk business and business pieces of it, but if you start throwing the politic piece in it, then that's a different discussion. And there's all different examples of stuff going on where we got third parties coming in, selling off 51% of their business so they can get it and get a bit of a bid reduction. Yet I'm being asked, well, you guys are a successful First Nation company, so you guys should be able to bow out and not take that because you don't need it. Well, I get that, but then let's talk business to business, because if you're going to allow somebody to come in and get a 5% bid reduction, and I'm going to lose mine because I'm a successful First Nation company, that doesn't make sense. So I think and that's where the politics starts getting into it. And that's where I think if we had a forum where we could go in and talk business to business, and then there's a politics and keep the politics piece out of it, then yeah, for sure, I think it's something that needs to be done, because I see both sides of this. I see both sides of each of the parties that are having the discussions at this point. But I think I'm going to say, I'm just going to leave it at that because it gets into a bigger conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
Anybody else on that? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to make a couple comments on that as well. Yeah, thanks for your comments there, Alex. My name is Pat Titus. I'm with the Kelowna Community Development Limited Partnership, and I realize that all First Nation development corporations, investment corporations, and community corporations are structured differently. And we do have a lot of First Nations in the Yukon here that really would like to see these initiatives move forward. For instance, I work for a community development corporation, and we really would like to work and strengthen our relationship with the local government to move forward with some of these projects based on the First Nations procurement policy. But I'm a Yukon First Nation person. And I think that the link between the First Nation government and community development corporations, or even the other corporations as well, we need to rely on each other. And whether it's politics or not, I think we got to strengthen those relationships. And that's my thoughts on how we move forward with First Nation development corporations. The development corporation has been around for the last 30 years, and it's worked for some communities, but it hasn't worked for some communities as well. So that's why there's different models out there for community corporations that rely on capital projects such as this. We only have limited opportunities in our traditional territories. So, these are initiatives and these discussions I think are important. In regards to how can CYFN or Yukon First Nation Chamber of Commerce participate, having discussions like this is key, I think. But I think it's Yukon government and the First Nations and the corporations got to work together on how we have these discussions. I'm sitting here right now having this discussion and participating in this meeting. I talked to our First Nation. They provided me with the information of the 5-year capital plan for Burwash Landing area, Kelowna area. And somehow there's some idea there's some sort of conflict of interest if we're sitting at the table with YG with our First Nation. So we got to get around these kind of barriers, and I think work together on how we can move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. So I guess what I'm hearing is there is room for information sharing and how we do it. I think we need to be open to different ways of communicating. That would be from YG to Yukon First Nation government, YG to First Nation Development Corps. That would be through conduits like CYFN and YFNCC to get the information out there. and possibly host more sessions such as these to make sure that information is shared and people are aware. And Alex had brought up YCA. That's another good source of information sharing there. So any way that we can help First Nation Development Corps and businesses participate on Yukon government procurement opportunities, I think we need to hold each other up and share that information as much as we can.
Yeah, thanks, Albert, and thanks everybody for your comments there. And I agree with what you're saying in terms of there is room to have that conversation in some way, and we're happy to kind of explore ways of doing that. We can follow up with that the next little while and kind of figure out the right way to do that. But I'll indicate that we're very open to that. And would be happy to see what we could do. So. And that just that fits a little bit to what I wanted to talk about next, and that's continuing to kind of evolve the process that we've started here. Like I say, we've been at this now for 3 years, and we try to evolve it kind of continuously each year. This year, of course, we evolved it right into the procurement policy and conversations around CDAs, and that's been good. We've been really engaging as well with First Nation governments on kind of hearing about their plans and priorities, and that's been good. But again, we're happy to continue to evolve this. And if that involves some sort of engagement with DevCorps, so we can certainly look at that and have that conversation about what that looks like. But we'd be happy to do that, or at least explore and see if there's a good way to do that. So yeah. That's all I really had on in terms of the 5-year capital plan. Like I say, you have the information of the public plan. We'll try and get some sort of a summary of spending by traditional territory or planning by traditional territory and circulate that back so you can see that as well. So I think I'll move next to just a little bit around community development agreements. And so most of you are probably aware of community development agreements through the First Nation procurement policy. As they're section 11, I think, of the policy, 7.9, and that really commits YG to work collaboratively with First Nation governments on the development of CDAs. Purpose of those CDAs is to maximize benefits related to business and employment development for First Nation people, communities from projects within traditional territories. And then there is pieces related to governance, schedule benefit planning, etc. I have some notes here just on the process for developing a CDA. So First Nation government will identify projects we would like to have in a community development agreement. Capital planning meetings that we've been having are sort of maybe the start point for some of that, but they carry on from there. And then if First Nations have an interest in a CDA and any particular project, they can be in touch either through my office or through Maddie, and we can then link you up with the sort of the correct channel within YG. There's CDA thresholds, which is a kind of a quota of CDAs per First Nation government. That's included in the policy. And the projects that are most suitable are the ones that will deliver and maximize direct benefits to the community in terms of business and workforce development. And then there's a comment about certain projects wouldn't be suitable for a CDA for different reasons, basically because they would have little or no community benefits, probably because they're too narrow in focus. So CDAs are new. We're rolling. We're starting a few discussions on CDAs. Already, I know that they're starting to happen. So that's probably the extent of what I can tell you on CDAs. But if anybody had any questions, I could take them back, or I could arrange to have Maddie or somebody from the Procurement Support Center reach out and follow up with you if you want anything more than what I just gave there. So, any questions? Okay. So just last point on community contract forecasts. And again, this is something that is being led through the Highways and Public Works Procurement Support Center. And we've been presenting this information to First Nation governments. And what it involves is for the current fiscal year, 21-22, the Procurement Support Center looks out ahead for 6 months, and they do a forecast of all of our tendering, be it O&M, capital, major projects, minor projects. It actually turns into a fairly extensive list. We've been sharing those within the communities or traditional territories directly with First Nation governments. The intent, though, is to get into a routine of updating those every 6 months, and then making that information generally available, within YG or within, with sort of just generally with outside of YG, including First Nations, non-First Nations, and actually do some really good forecasting. So it's the first attempt at that. I can tell you that of the lists I saw, they're pretty comprehensive. They're pretty extensive. They've been shared individually with First Nations, but if anybody here had an interest in seeing any of that information or any of those forecasts, by all means, again, you could probably, Maddie is going to be your best contact, but if you're interested, you can also let me know, and we can try and follow up if you have an interest in seeing that. Yeah, it's going to be a good tool for us and the contracting community and First Nations going forward for sure. So, yeah. And again, that's probably all I can say on that one. So, yeah.
Scott, would that forecast be available on the HPW website?
Yeah, not yet, Albert, but that's the intent. It's brand new. Like, they've just been at this for the last, I'd say 6 weeks. They've been working at this, and we've done the first set of them. So they've just been getting out as we've been doing engagements with First Nations. But I think the intent is, and it could be soon, I won't say necessarily over the next few weeks, but sometime this year, is to actually make that information available in some form online. So, yeah.
And with that, is there a tie-in to the, I guess, the buy and sell, Yukon buy and sell?
You mean the bids and tenders? Is that what you mean? Or
And tenders?
Yeah. There might be. There is some tender forecasting that occurs there, I think, as well. But and that might ultimately be the way that information gets released. I'm not sure. And again, Maddie would have to speak to that. And unfortunately, she wasn't here. But if I could have Maddie follow up, Albert, or if you had a question or anything specific on that. I can't speak with preciseness about how they're going to release that stuff. So, but I know the intent is really to get it out there. So,
yeah, and I guess what I'm interested in is if we can share that information with everyone or our members, that would be great for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I can say really that's the intent, is to really forecast out. And Maddie always cautions this, right? Because as you know, when you get into these things, so the forecast is kind of like a weather forecast. It's accurate to a point, but things can change too. So we always sort of provide the caveat that it's the best forecast we have going forward of what will be tendered over the next 6 months or whatever the period is. But it is subject to change, right? But it's still useful information, I think, for people to know that. So, yeah. Any other questions on that or anything? Okay. So that's the extent of what I had today for everyone. I appreciate that conversation and the point about engagement with DevCorps, and something we'll definitely follow up on and put some thought to about the right way to do that. And in our engagements with First Nations, we're quite okay if they invite their DevCorp, and many of the meetings DevCorp reps do show up. But we haven't thought about DevCorps as a group unto itself too much yet. But like I say, we're happy to evolve and happy to look at that. So,
I think that would be beneficial. Like,
Yeah.
I know that we're trying to move from the silos and work horizontally in conjunction with everyone. So the
Yeah.
more we can do that, the better. I know that there's challenges and different mandates. So it's how we maneuver through that maze.
For sure. And then we had the idea about trying to provide an overall picture of the capital plan by traditional territory, and we'll certainly put our minds to that as well and try and get something, you know, back, some form of information back to you on that. Yeah, and yeah, the idea of, like I say, the idea of engagement with DevCorps, we'll get back to you on that as well. So.
Okay. Mithia has a question.
Oh, okay.
And it's, have all the 2021-22 contracts been issued?
Yeah, good question. And I'd say we're kind of midstream right now. A lot of the seasonally dependent construction work is kind of out, but there is tenders coming out throughout the year. We do a lot of tendering. We try and do something now called right time tendering, where we will tender work kind of throughout the year rather than a big spring rush, particularly for construction. So a good example of that will be the Sutton Bay Bridge, which will be, it's really a project that construction will start next year, but we're trying to get the tender out for that in the fall this year. So, which will give enough time for advanced planning and that type of thing. So that's a biggie that'll be out. And there's quite a few other tenders that'll be out still throughout the year. So I'd say, yeah, definitely not all the contracts have been issued. Quite a few have, but definitely not all. I don't have a breakdown of what's still outstanding, but more to come for sure. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank you, Scott, for taking the time to go through this. And also to the CEOs of the First Nation Development Corps, and Amos and Thea and Peter for joining us today. I think it's been very helpful, and if any of you can share this discussion, and if others have questions, please contact Madeline or Scott.
Yes.
And the 5-year capital plan is on the website, and we'll definitely keep sharing any information that is sent to us. And yeah, thank you so much.
And thanks, Albert, to you and Melissa for arranging all this. Really appreciate it.
And thanks for reminding us, Peter.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Really great to meet you all, and yeah, hope to talk again soon. And yeah, if you have any questions on anything either that we talked about today, or the 5-year plan, or any of the First Nation procurement policy stuff, by all means get in touch, and we'll be more than happy to try and answer. So yeah,
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and just a reminder that in September we're having the CEO panel on YFN procurement process and how Yukon businesses can partner and participate with Yukon First Nation businesses to build relationships and bid on contracts. So it's part of the Yukon First Nation procurement process, and regarding bid value reduction, we've had some questions from the business community, and so it'll be an opportunity for the CEOs to tell them their side of the story. So
Albert, I had one more thing. I just for anybody who's still on the line here. If any of you or represent companies that have not yet registered in the First Nations business registry, or if you're talking to other First Nations businesses that have not, please encourage them to do that, because we're trying to build a significant database of that, and that's being supported by the Yukon First Nations Chamber of Commerce. And I've already encountered one situation where I was steering somebody towards it as they were looking for some First Nations owned businesses to do some construction resources. So I suspect that most of you, if not all, that are participating today have already registered, but please spread the word to any First Nations businesses.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Is the best place to provide feedback on that registry to Yukon First Nation Chamber of Commerce?
Right now, that would be Yukon government, I think.
Yeah.
And what channel or who?
That would,
There just there was some feedback. I think Albert, I discussed this with you when I was in Whitehorse, I believe last time.
yeah.
Or maybe it was in that meeting, but I just wonder if that's gotten back to them, or if it hasn't, who we could bring that feedback to.
That would be Madeline, and I did share that with Madeline.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
thanks, everyone.